Hello and welcome back to another video, and today I am just resting, getting ready to tackle the second job. But today I wanted to do a quick post, even though I haven't been feeling that well. I'm going to get this out here on the channel. But today we are going to talk about the new show on the DC streaming service that is called Titans. Now, Titans is a very interesting show, and I think off initial glances, and even from reviews that I've read, this show gets dismissed, and you have to really get into it in order to kind of understand and see the format that they were going for. And I think and believe as this show progresses and it's on for a bit, it's going to hit its stride, especially in the second season, considering what they set up for. So let me dive right into it. First off, if you are a subscriber of DC Universe like I am, this show is aimed kind of like what Netflix does with the more mature shows. It is a superhero show, but it is not designed for kids whatsoever. It's more for adult viewing. With that in mind, there is tons of violence, lots of profanity, and some other inappropriate things that is not suitable for children. So that is my full disclaimer before I jump into this review. I'm going to start with the overall view, the pros, the cons, and then I'm going to get into whether or not I think this is worth a look-see. So Titans is a story about five individuals that are brought together due to some circumstances, and they form a team. If any of you follow the comic books, this team would be called the Teen Titans, led by, of course, the former Robin of Batman, Dick Grayson. Very famous Robin, and I believe probably the only living Robin, because all the other ones have had stuff happen through them through the years, but Grayson left and became Nightwing. So just a little tidbit there. Now, a lot of people dismiss this show, and I'll get into this when I get into my cons, but because of the dark edginess of the show, there's even a quote where he says, blank Batman, which became a big internet thing because people are like, why is Robin saying that? But if you go through the show and you see the progression of the characters, we get more insight into why Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne, a.k.a. Batman, had a falling out, and why now he is in, I believe, Star City, and Batman is currently in Gotham. There is a great lead-in that kind of brings things full circle, and I'll get back to that as I get into this review. So anyways, Dick Grayson is an intriguing character, and I'm going to go into my pros here because I believe that this goes into each individual character. My favorite character was Dick Grayson. He had an interesting arc, and it's interesting to see how he kind of has this dark side, and it's hinted to here and there, and the last 2 episodes or so really drive home this battle within himself not to become like Batman. He feels like even though Batman does a lot of good things, that he's so close to the line, and that Grayson left because he did not want to be the extreme side of Batman and cross that line. Of course, if you read the comic book and watch the movies, you know what that line is for Batman. The one thing that he doesn't ever want to do in order to cross over to the dark side, and that is actually kill someone, because he considers that irredeemable. And granted, Batman has done some dark stuff through his run in the comic books and the shows, but one thing he never does is he never crosses what he considers that really morally bad line. And it's intriguing to see the correlation between the two. We have Starfire. Can't remember the actress, but she's an African-American actress. Everyone made a big deal about switching up the character's color, and because not so much that it was an issue of race, but rather alien-wise. In the shows, she's green I think that that's just a ridiculous argument. If you're doing a modern take on the characters, then you have to kind of switch it to a modern thing. I think the diversity factor actually works in this case because it does show how out of place this character is. If you know the story, she plays Starfire, who is a character that is not of this world. Her people are orange, and they have these like fire kind of abilities. We've got Beast Boy, who, once again, I'll probably do a more in-depth because this is non-spoiler, and I'll get the actors' names. I just want to give a general overview, and Beast Boy is also played by an Asian kid. Can't remember his name. Stellar actor, though. Beast Boy in the comics is known to be kind of the heart of the Teen Titans, jokes a lot and things like that. And whoever they got to play Beast Boy does a fantastic job of adding levity in what would otherwise be a really, really dark show. I believe they meet him, or were introduced to him, where he is stealing a video game because he's a big gamer, which I kind of found funny because I'm a gamer myself. And these security guards, who are basically your run-in-the-mill, just guarding a store kind of security guards, chase him down, and he transforms into a giant tiger and growls at them. And the special effects done for this was amazing. So kudos, they casted it right. Now, the biggest complaint, and I'm still on the fence about this character, but the character of Raven, who even in the shows has a very gothic kind of look, dark hair, wears dark clothes, kind of a deal. But why she does this is because she is part of the supernatural aspect of the show. Raven channels powers from another dimension, and her father is called Trigon, who is essentially an evil being from an alternate plane that gives her powers, and she essentially harnesses all of her abilities through this dimension. And she has the ability to heal, to throw up force barriers. There's even an ability where she can literally rip the soul out of a person, their body. But there's also psychic things and things like that, but she tends to not channel those powers in fear of touching that darkness. And what this show boils down to, I feel, when they're not trying to introduce new characters, is to introduce the struggle that Raven has, because her character is the central narrative, which leads to our overarching bad guy you don't see until just about the end, named Trigon. Trigon is a walker of dimensions. He destroys worlds, and he does this by bringing out people's most darkest, deepest desires, fears, hatred, anger, things like that. He brings it to the surface, and he covers the world in basically seething hatred and all the evil parts that people keep held down within them. So I think that this show is a great study on the things that we fight every day. And to have a villain that actually his whole power is to bring forth what people generally suppress is a very interesting it's a very interesting concept. And Trigon is an interesting villain because his evil comes from the fact that he manipulates what's already been there inside of a person. To my knowledge, Trigon has never actually killed someone, but has manipulated events for other people to do it to themselves. And I think that makes a very compelling and interesting villain, because he's not a villain in the sense of being a villain. It brings it kind of back to a biblical thing where he's more like the devil in the fact that he forces people to do the evil deeds themselves. He gives them a choice. He creates illusions, and within that illusion, you have multiple paths you can take. And how he takes control of a person is if they choose the wrong path. They call them trials, and everyone has a trial, and it is up to you whether or not you choose to go towards the thing that is the evil that motivates you. So, for instance, they do a great thing with Dick Grayson, and I don't want to give too much away because it'll spoil quite possibly the best finale, but his whole thing is not becoming Batman. So his trial is how he handles if Batman was to ever become evil, which is a great flip on the universe. And it's episode 11, and definitely worth a check out. So to me, hands down, my favorite episode, especially the very end after the credits. They have a post-credit scene that is really worth watching. So my pros are Beast Boy is amazing. He adds a lot of humor. He has his own little character arc, and he does something in an episode. And because of the kind of individual he is and so kind-hearted in nature, what he does really affects him. And it's great to see a character on a dark show where characters make morally great choices so easily, to have that heart of the show, so to speak, go through that journey of doing something really terrible and how it affects them. Like, he's basically the mascot for everyone getting along and being together. But what happens when he's dealing with it on his own? He throws jokes in front of the group to make it seem like business as usual, but on his own, you see how it really weighs him down, both physically and emotionally. And I think that's great. Like I said, some people had problems with Dick Grayson. I like Dick Grayson. I like his evolution, and I like this concept of how he came from working with Batman and how he sees Batman in a certain way where people see Batman as a hero. He's lived with Batman, and he's crime fight with Batman, and he's seen the darkness that the Batman touches, and it scared him. It scared him to a point where he had to leave the city. Chicago, that's where they're at. And he leaves Gotham to go to Chicago, which isn't much of a change of venue, to get away from this darkness that he fears Batman brings. And then a couple of things happen through this series, and he realizes that because of tragedy in his life, him and Bruce are the same, which is why Bruce was always more affectionate for him. Plus, he was the first Robin, but Bruce understood that this kid had the same exact darkness that he did. So, or, he still does. And so it's a good dynamic. Probably my least favorite character is Raven, and I'll get to that in a second in my cons. And then I'd go Starfire, and her character really has nothing to do until you get to the last two episodes. Then they touch on it for about 5 minutes. And then it's kind of done. And it's interesting because her character does have a cool arc in the show so far, and some cool things happen. And right when you get to really wanting to know more about her story, they cut the episode and they go into more of Raven's story and Trigon coming and things like that. And this leads me to my cons. My con is that this show in the beginning was a slow start. Not in terms of the action, but of the pacing of the story. And it felt a little disjointed and kind of all over the place. And they do pull it together nicely at the end, but there's a lot of special guests, and I feel like they cluttered it with all of these other side characters to kind of give a nod instead of focusing on the central characters and letting us build a very even relationship with them and then diving into these special guests. I mean, pretty much almost every single episode has a special guest. We see Hawk and Dove. We see the Doom Patrol, which leads into this series, the Doom Patrol. We see Wonder Girl. And don't get me wrong, these are great cameos, but they take away from the story of the core group. And I think what they're going for is the core group. And Raven would be an excellent story, but you have so much breakup in between and then trying to tie it into her narrative that at times it's kind of schizophrenic in the storytelling, and it gets really confusing at times. And I've had to go back through and be like, okay, I see how it connects once I watch this episode. And if you're releasing an episode one per week, it could be really annoying trying to follow it coherently. It's almost like I had to wait for all the episodes to come out so I can watch them. So if there was something I didn't get, I could go back through and kind of retrace my steps and see where I lost the story tag. And good storytelling shouldn't be like that, especially if you're doing a one episode format. You should do an overarching theme and a self-contained story. I think the best show that does this well, which is still on, is Supernatural. They have a Monster of the Week format, but they also have an overarching storyline where the monsters tie into the main story. So you can still follow that main narrative that they're telling, and they'll do an episode to get you back on it. And then they'll have little stories in between. And these help the characters grow, and they help us to connect to each individual character because they'll have their own arc. And I think that's where Titans is still trying to find its footing. And that is a really big con for me, because disjointed story can really take you out of the episode, and it can really throw you back. I'd almost say to anyone looking to watch this, don't watch them as they premiere. Wait for 2 or 3 episodes to come along. That way you can watch them in a string as opposed to watching them separate. Thankfully, the first season is completely done, and you can watch them one after the other, as I chose to do. So is this worth a watch? Is it worth your time to invest in Titans? I'd say absolutely. Titans has done something for the budget that it has. It has done something amazing. It's got great fight choreographing. The CG is pretty decent for a streaming show. You can tell where sometimes the budget doesn't accommodate the episode, but that's okay. And I think that the characters are just getting started, and that there's room for them to grow and develop, and there's room as an audience for us to develop in the characters. The worst thing is having a season so great that there's nothing left for you to explore. And I think that the creators of the show have only really hit the surface of these characters and why we should care about them. I think this is worth investing your time, and I think you should give it a look over and give it a chance. Don't dismiss it off of the first or even second episode. Really stick in there, and you'll find a great gem in this programming that they have. Now, the bigger question, is this worth investing in another streaming service? As it stands, DC is going to get Swamp Thing, the Harley Quinn show with Poison Ivy, which I am looking forward to. They have Doom Patrol, which I've started watching for you guys. It is spectacular, and it has one of my favorite people in the world as one of the actors, and that is a person who was also in the James Bond film series. So, I mean, and it has Brandon Fraser as well. Those of you who don't know who Brandon Fraser is, Brandon Fraser is the person who does The Mummy. He also plays a great character in this show. So they got some big name talent. Timothy Dalton is also in the show, and if you don't know who Timothy Dalton is, he was, like I said, in James Bond. He's a well-known, great, accomplished actor, and he also lends his talents to this show. So Doom Patrol is definitely very quirky, very interesting, more lighthearted than Teen Titans, and I will be doing a review as I finish an episode to let you know my thoughts on that. So anyways, definitely check it out, support it. I would say there's going to be a release for it eventually on DVD or whatever else. The streaming service for DC, you can do a monthly deal, I believe, for like $7.99. That's personal preference on whether or not you want to invest in another streaming service. But for us geeks, there's also comics, there's a discussion panel, there's all this new content. There is every single great DC film, and I mean the old ones. The old Batmans, the old Superman. I mean, it was a blast from the past. I was watching Superman 1, 2, and 3, and Batman, Batman Returns, and Batman Forever, Dark Knight. I mean, they got it all on here. And the cartoons. Teen Titans, the cartoon. They have Young Justice. They have Justice Unlimited. They have the Batman. They have the 90s Batman. I mean, this is a great platform for everything great DC has created up to this point. And if you don't have the streaming service, definitely check it out because it is worth it just for the comics and the old movies alone. But these new series add a depth, and I think as it goes on and these series gain footing and gain a fan base, they'll be a strong competitor to these other services if they can keep the optimization good, because sometimes it crashes. You have to watch it on the tablet. So anyways, that's my long-winded explanation. This has been another review. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you do, click that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the buzzer to get notified when I do updates on my channel. I will be making more vids as soon as I get over this cold. Thank you very much. And all y'all out there, I will see you at the next review or the movies. You know which one, to all of the people who work with me. Anyways, peace and have a good evening.